What if the very parts of yourself you've been fighting have become your greatest source of strength? A profound transition occurs on the path of self-discovery, when the inner darkness that once governed you from the hidden recesses of your mind finally ascends into awareness. In that unveiling, it relinquishes its oppressive command over your life. Carl Jung dedicated his career to exploring the concept of the shadow, that secret domain of the psyche, where we enter every aspect of ourselves we have disavowed, ignored, or suppressed. For a long while, this internal shade functions as an unseen influence, molding your responses, your cravings, and even your dread, while you remain oblivious to its origin. It works under the radar, subtly yet persistently directing your decisions and your self-perception. For the majority, the shadow stays unconscious forever. It keeps expressing itself through projections, fixations, and repetitive acts of self-sabotage that appear bewildering and beyond control. It can provoke intense reactions to trivial provocations, attract you to partnerships that reopen old scars, or cause you to fear attributes within yourself that you only confess to recognizing when observed in others. But a critical juncture arrives, a deep-seated internal change emerging from truthful self-reflection, arduous personal confrontation, and the slow cultivation of emotional sincerity. In that instant, the shadow ceases to be a foe, a clandestine underminer. It becomes incorporated, and the very vitality that once felt damaging begins to convert into innovative force, insight, and internal solidity. This transition signals the start of a fresh chapter of psychological emancipation, a phase where the shadow no longer monopolizes your life force, but rather enriches it. Jung realized the shadow isn't simply an inventory of your shortcomings. It is the complete sum of everything you had to stifle to gain approval, to adjust to your familial environment, or to meet the demands of your society. It harbors all the feelings you were never given license to display, the yearnings you were instructed to mask, the capabilities you had to downplay, and even the originality you surrendered to belong. Yet, it also holds tremendous psychological wealth, dormant possibilities, talents, and endowments that you buried because they challenged the established order surrounding you. The initial clear indicator that your shadow no longer governs your energy is that you halt projecting onto others what you have not reconciled within yourself. Jung identified projection as the principal channel through which the unconscious shadow impacts our everyday reality. When an element within you stays unadmitted, you start to perceive it amplified in other individuals. You find fault in them for what you privately fear or avoid confronting in your own character. You experience outsized anger toward conduct that reflects unassimilated traits inside you. Prior to integration, if someone seems conceited, you may explode because you haven't embraced your own latent pride. If someone appears feeble, you may disdain them because you haven't assimilated your own tenderness. If someone flourishes, you may feel bitter envy because you haven't yet asserted your own entitlement to prosper. Every exaggerated emotional response serves as a signal, a prompt to investigate a fragment of yourself that has stayed concealed, unprocessed, or severed from awareness. But once you've accomplished the labor of integration, something elemental shifts. You no longer require other people to embody villains so you can cast yourself as the hero. You no longer perceive reality filtered through the prism of your unhealed injuries. You can acknowledge the flaws of others without feeling compelled to condemn them, because you've already turned the gaze inward and beheld your own imperfections with openness. You can observe another's triumph without that eating envy, because you've ultimately reclaimed your own inherent authority and no longer subscribe to the belief that their achievement depletes your own value. Jung named this the retrieval of projections, deeming it a cornerstone of psychological maturity. When you start to see that your emotional responses toward others have tempered, when circumstances that once enraged you can now be viewed with serenity, when you no longer harbor a perpetual need to designate external adversaries, it means your shadow is being assimilated. You are no longer dominated by the emotional hurricanes that used to overpower you. Instead, you can remain centered, conscious, and respond from a place of integrity rather than reflexive self-protection. This retrieval is not a sign of detachment. It is evidence you've assumed ownership of your inner realm. It means you've ceased subcontracting your unresolved struggles to the external world. It means you've embarked on the road toward wholeness. The second sign is that your habits of self-sabotage have lessened significantly, and you can now preserve achievement without unconsciously wrecking it. Jung saw the unintegrated shadow act as an internal subversive, stealthily sabotaging the exact aspirations the conscious self holds dearest. This generates that wearying loop where you approach a pivotal threshold, only to enact something that causes everything to disintegrate right at the moment of advancement. You finally obtain the position you've always wanted. Then, inexplicably, you begin arriving tardy repeatedly, as if a phantom hand were tugging you back toward the known. You find yourself in a truly affectionate bond, then unknowingly ignite quarrels that degrade the very intimacy you desired. You initiate a vital endeavor full of zeal and promise, then delay until the entire structure falls apart. These cycles aren't merely misfortune, nor are they proof of a character flaw or lazy discipline. They are the shadow articulating ancient, unconscious convictions that whisper you aren't prepared, aren't deserving, or aren't permitted to evolve into a fuller self. The shadow archives every unscrutinized limiting notion absorbed in early life. Every lesson that implied desiring more is gluttonous, that excelling is risky, that achieving will alienate you, or that affection comes with strings. And from the obscurity of the unconscious, it operates with stunning fidelity to those antiquated scripts. It shields you from rising too far because, in its corrupted logic, security lies in remaining limited. But when your shadow is integrated, when you expose these old beliefs to the light and scrutinize them without fright, their potency fades. They no longer operate your existence from backstage. You cease the automatic self-destruction. Accomplishment transforms into something you can uphold, rather than evade. You can welcome love without recoiling, without sensing it's an error or that you must atone for it. You can manifest your fortitude without fearing retribution. You can display your aptitudes without bracing for dismissal. Jung experienced this transformation personally. He understood the anguish of suppressing impulses that felt inappropriate for a man of science. When he finally owned his drive for influence, his craving for esteem, and the full magnitude of his inventive impulse, his connection to his own shadow altered. He no longer had to act diminished to conform to a professional persona. The segments he had ostracized became assimilated, and with that assimilation came true liberation. If you observe that the ruinous patterns that once ruled your life have eased or dissolved, if you can finally retain positive gains without dismantling them, if your existence is finding equilibrium at levels of prosperity that once seemed inaccessible or perilous, it indicates your shadow has been integrated enough to stop obstructing you. The vigor once employed to drag you downward is now liberated to help erect the life you authentically desire. The third sign is you've cultivated the ability to contain your own internal polarities without fragmenting toward one extreme. Jung spoke of the strain of opposites as fundamental to the psyche's development. Every person houses a range of antitheses: care and wrath, power and susceptibility, self-reliance and need, brilliance and gloom. The unformed personality tries to align with only one extreme, exiling its counterpoint into shadow. But the individual who has integrated their shadow can sustain both extremes concurrently. Before integration, if you were the pillar of strength, you couldn't exhibit fragility without feeling your whole sense of self was under siege. If you were the compassionate one, you couldn't voice rage without remorse. If you were the cerebral one, you couldn't permit profound sentiment without suspecting you were forfeiting command. Each pole cages its opposite, breeding inflexibility and psychological discord. But with shadow integration, you acquire adaptability. You can transition between different facets of yourself as the situation warrants. You can be unyielding when endurance is necessary, and exposed when closeness demands candor. You can cherish profoundly while also drawing firm lines. You can reason logically and still grant entry to your emotional universe. Jung termed this the transcendent capacity, the internal mechanism that generates a union between opposites instead of leaving you mired in strife. It permits you to encounter yourself as something more essential and entire than any solitary identity could represent. If you find yourself growing more pliable, more capable of reaching parts that once felt prohibited or hazardous, if the stiffness of your persona has relaxed into a deeper, more layered intricacy, it's a sign your shadow is being assimilated. You no longer need to be simplistic to feel protected. You are evolving into the captivating, paradoxical, complete person you were always destined to become. The fourth sign, and this one penetrates a deeper stratum, so offer it your undivided attention, is that your dreams have started transforming from persecutory terrors to more symmetrical or even cooperative engagements with shadowy forms. Jung allocated a tremendous segment of his inquiry to dreams, viewing them as among the most transparent apertures into the shadow's condition. He found that when the shadow is wholly unconscious, the psyche fabricates dreams overflowing with frightful pursuers, monstrous creatures hunting you, or sinister powers intent on your ruin. These dreams manifest the ego's dread of the shadow's contents, and also the potent energy the shadow must radiate to gain attention. Yet something incredible begins to unfold as integration advances. The characters in your dreams commence to alter. The beast that once pursued you relentlessly may now merely observe from a remove. The assailant might reshape into a somber but sagacious mentor. Even destructive agencies may disclose themselves as unrefined potency you can learn to harness. Jung recorded this progression meticulously in his personal dream logs. As he engaged his inner obscurity, he noted the manner, symbolism, and purpose of his dream figures transform. If your nightmares have subsided, if dark dream presences now possess equivocal or multifaceted traits instead of appearing purely malicious, or if you've experienced dreams where you cooperate with these shadowy elements, your unconscious is indicating that integration is genuinely occurring. Dreams are the immediate dialect of the unconscious, and when the unconscious mirrors advancement, you can credit that reflection far more than any intellectual assessment manufactured by the ego. The fifth sign is you've recovered personal authority you once attributed to parental figures or anticipated others to confer upon you. Jung comprehended that part of what we consign to shadow is our own sovereignty, our faculty to impact, to guide, to act with resolve. Many individuals, particularly those reared in settings where exhibiting vigor or assurance was penalized, thrust their innate authority into shadow and then cast it onto figures of power. Before integrating this dimension, you linger for employers, companions, family, or organizations to bestow upon you the license to be potent. You bemoan that nobody presents you chances without recognizing you haven't granted yourself permission to step into your own capacity. You pursue incessant external endorsement because you haven't endorsed your own right to claim room, to speak with assurance, and to apply leverage. This suppressed authority leaves you feeling impotent, despite potentially possessing remarkable gifts. But once you commence integrating this disowned might, something radical occurs. You stop waiting for others to authorize you and simply seize your power as your natural right. You choose without craving consent. You articulate your truth without the crippling terror of critique. You occupy physical and psychological space without offering apologies. You apply impact without embarrassment or blame. Jung referenced this shift as the awakening of inner sovereignty, the moment when the authentic self becomes your navigational compass instead of external opinions or imposed frameworks. If you've noticed, you no longer hunt for external ratification. If you can make significant determinations while relying on your own judgment. If you feel empowered from within, even when facing opposition, then you've integrated a critical shadow aspect. The authority you once cast outward finally reverts to its proper residence within you. And paradoxically, this doesn't inflate arrogance, it fosters equilibrium. Authority that has been integrated is authority that becomes accountable, rooted, and awake. It's vital to grasp that shadow integration is not a solitary episode, but a perpetual progression. Jung was unequivocal on this. New strata will perpetually emerge. The psyche is too expansive to be entirely charted in one lifespan. But a vast gulf exists between being tyrannized by an unconscious shadow and maintaining a conscious rapport with it. When it tyrannizes, it commands you via imperceptible projections, inexplicable self-sabotage, and psychological rigidity that seems insurmountable. Once you've completed sufficient work to establish a relationship with your shadow, even when fresh material surfaces from the abyss, you now hold the instruments, the consciousness, and the internal firmness to engage it with awareness. You are no longer a casualty of your unconscious. You evolve into a co-creator with it. Jung expended his lifetime probing, confronting, and integrating his shadow. Even in advanced age, he reported uncovering concealed facets. But by then, the procedure no longer horrified him. It enthralled him. He had cultivated what he described as a devotional posture toward the unconscious, a profound esteem, and a readiness to sustain the conversation, knowing the psyche's revelation is boundless and yet infinitely significant. If you desire to continue probing this work and other deep dimensions of analytical psychology, ensure you subscribe, as here we persistently explore insights that can unfetter the psychic force confined within the unseen. This interior toil isn't merely another checkbox on a spiritual agenda. It's the most crucial voyage you can embark upon, for it tinges absolutely every other facet of your existence. The more you shed light on what was once concealed, the more autonomy you generate in each thought, selection, and instinct that forms your reality. Emancipating yourself from the shadow's autocracy ranks among the most metamorphic passages on the road of individuation. It's as though you spent your entire lifetime residing under the dominion of an unseen despot, one you never glimpsed yet, who dictated your feelings, urges, and replies. Then, abruptly, That despot is deposed. The force that once seemed intimidating becomes an asset you can finally employ, a propellant for your expansion instead of its obstruction. Life doesn't become faultless, but it becomes more genuine, more supple, more congruent with who you veritably are, beneath all the strata you once misconstrued as your identity. If you discern these indicators in your own passage, if your projections onto others have waned, if routines of self-sabotage no longer direct your verdicts, if you can now contain opposing sentiments or concepts without disintegrating, if your dreams have changed in tenor or imagery, if you've retrieved a sensation of personal puissance that once felt dissipated or fractured, then allow yourself an instant of acknowledgement. Congratulations! You've shouldered one of the most strenuous psychological undertakings a human can encounter. A mission multitudes elude their entire lives because facing one's interior darkness demands more valor than most ever conceive. You've gazed straight into your own shadows without retreating. You've approached your inner gloom without merging with it, without permitting it to decree your merit or your fate. You've taken its crude, anarchic vitality and transmuted it from something damaging into something deeply formative. Your shadow is no longer your antagonist. It has become your associate, a fountain of insight, resilience, and genuineness. And all the energy it once expended, derailing your advancement, hindering your maturation, or keeping you fixed in rotations of dread, is now accessible to you. It becomes the kindling for constructing the life you authentically wish to inhabit. The life that mirrors your core, not your injuries. If this exploration connected, please press like. It sincerely aids this channel, Wines of Thought. Thank you for listening.